I want to see if I can expand my access a little bit more. Let me see if there's netcat running on the system. So I'm going to type netcat -h for help. And I get this output, which is the help for netcat. Brilliant. So netcat is installed and running, as is the case with almost every Linux system. One difference though that you might notice from different distributions or different versions of netcat is the -e option for netcat, the one that you see here. In this case, we're lucky because this option exists. We can use it, and you'll see why in a moment. However, sometimes you might get access to a system with netcat that does not have the -e option, and that can be a bit of a pain. You'll find out why in just a moment. So let me continue trying to get better access to the system. As you can see here, I can use netcat to have it listen to an inbound connection. In other words, I can use netcat to have it open a port on the system that it lives on, in this case the Metasploitable box, and have it listen on this port. So if you remember again the very first shell that we got on port 1524, I can actually get netcat to do something similar to this. And for me to be able to do that, I need to use the -l option, which means listen, and -p for port, and I'm going to choose port 1234. So right now I'm telling netcat to please listen on port 1234, and I submit the request. You'll see that the request keeps going on and on and on, and this is a good indication that the request is still happening. The port is open and it's listening. The connection did not stop. I can verify this by running a quick nmap scan on port 1234 and the IP address of my target, and as you can see here, the result comes back telling me that the port is open. Similar to what I've done in the first part when I used netcat to connect to the port, I'm going to use it again, this time connecting to port 1234. Now before I hit enter, let's pause for a second and try to answer this question. What do you think is going to happen now? I'm using netcat to connect to the IP address of my target on port 1234, which I know is open. What do you think is going to be the result after I hit the enter key? Think about that for a second. I hope you thought nothing, because as you can see here, nothing is happening. So there's a port open. Yes, I managed to get netcat to open port 1234. However, it's just listening on this port. There's no actual service running on it. There's no FTP service, there's no shell service, there's no web service, there's nothing. It's just an open port sitting there. So now what I need to do is I need to recreate what happens on port 1524. Now you might be wondering, why on earth am I recreating this if port 1524 is already open? That's because I guarantee you will never ever face a situation where you have a shell listening on a port. This is an extremely vulnerable virtual machine that was created for the purpose of being hacked. However, in real life, you will not be so lucky. So you will need to actually create this manually yourself. And this is what we're doing right now. So right now, I'm going to be replicating the functionality of port 1524. I'm going to get netcat to open a port, and instead of just opening the port and doing nothing, I'm going to have it attach the shell to this port so that when I connect to this port, I will be presented by a shell. Let's see how this works. This is where the -e option comes in handy. Remember, I told you we're lucky that this version of netcat has the -e option. And we have some help output here that tells us how to run it. Now notice that this says this is dangerous, and it is, because this allows anybody who connects to this port, not just you, to get shell access. So you have to be very careful when you do this, especially if you're doing it in a professional engagement. Here it doesn't matter because it's a lab in a closed environment, so it's not a big deal. So let's make this happen. I'm going to type -e/bin/bash, which we already know by now is the path to the bash shell. And again, I need to specify the listening mode, so tell netcat to listen on port 1234. I hit enter, and as you can see here, the spinner is going on and the connection is listening. Now let me try the command again. So I'm doing netcat to the IP address on port 1234. And before I hit enter, let me ask you this question again. What do you think now is going to happen? I hope you guessed that we will get shell access. So I hit enter and it looks like nothing's happened. However, if I run some commands, as you can see, I'm getting output. Notice, however, that I'm not getting every output. So I just mistakenly typed who am I instead of who am I. So there was a spelling mistake here. And notice that I did not get an error saying that the command does not exist. However, when I type the correct command, for example, ls, you see that I'm getting output returned correctly. And the reason this is happening is because I have access to what is known as a non-interactive shell. A non-interactive shell is, as the name suggests, a shell that does not interact well with me. So I will not get an output when an error happens. If something is downloading and it's taking a while, there's no prompt, there's no bars that will show me the progress, there's nothing going on. It's a shell that works absolutely fine. However, it's limited in its interactivity. So we call these non-interactive shells. They have the same functionality as every shell. However, they are unpleasant to deal with because oftentimes you can't see what you're doing and you don't get any feedback from the system. So as you can see here, now that I have exited the shell, I'm getting the output on the web page. And it says the whomI is a command that is not found because obviously I made a spelling mistake. But I did not get this output when I had the shell open in Netcat. Again, because this is a non-interactive shell. So now the question is, obviously, is there a way that I can get an interactive shell? A better shell that gives me more feedback and better feedback? And the answer, of course, is yes. We will be seeing how we do that in another section.